Hey guys, VaulSC here, and welcome to another episode of Let's Build Some Lists. This is the video series that I do on infiNity, where we sit down, go onto Army 6, our favorite app, drink some red wine as I like to do, chill out, and we go through Army 6 and build some armies of various different factions that are not necessarily designed to be optimized for competition. They're not meant to be ITS, tournament winning lists, but they will be interesting lists that allow me to share my thoughts about how you go about the list building process, which is something I find fun, and hopefully you guys do as well. So this time we're just going to pick a few factions that I've had on my mind a little bit lately, building some lists around some units that I've found quite interesting and I've spent a bit of time thinking about. That's the only theme of this, really. So feel free to sit back and come along with me as we go on a little bit of a thought adventure, as it were. Right, where to begin? The first list I'm going to do today, I'm going to do three. The first one is going to be Onyx. And we're going to jump into Onyx, and I play Onyx a lot, really love Onyx, one of my favorite sectorials. But there's one particular Harris team that you can build in the sectorial, and it was a bit of an eyebrow raiser when it first came out, but I've always talked it down to say, no, don't play it, it's not very good. And of course, I'm talking about the Umbra Samaritan with the two Zeodron Batroids. So with these guys, yeah, it's the only list in the game where you can take, a linked team involving tags, setting aside the duos, of course. We're talking about an actual meaningful linked team of 3+ members. This is it. They're unique in this sense, although I do get the feeling that Corvus Belli will change that in future and introduce more of them. So if you're watching this video in the future and you're looking at the past and they've come out by now, just check the date of the video, remember that. Anyway, one Umbra Samaritan plus two Zeodron Batroids. When the Umbra Samaritan first came out, I wasn't a big fan of him, but then as I explored him a bit more and started to understand the unit and playtest him more, I began to like him more and more and more. And it's because he's able to get into close combat quite reliably with his combination of his movement speed, super jump, his resilience, that kind of thing, ability to dodge. And once he does get there, he's able to quickly get back in anything he's going to be losing in a trade, whether it's running into a chain rifle or losing against Berserk or whatever it may be, because Brathion level 4 allows you to attack twice. And as he's going around the battlefield, he can get some shooting done as well. Because he's going to be so aggressive, he's going to be jumping up and making use of his gun. But at the end of the day, he doesn't have mimetism. He's just BS12. He's just got, a fairly straightforward arsenal there. So he's not one of the faction's biggest shooters. If you go and look at what the Legate can do, he can join a bigger link team. He's got mimetism, that kind of thing. So he's a little bit better on the shooting side of things. But the Samaritan gets in your face, and he's a lot more lethal, and he goes up in value. His stock rises when he gets right in there. But putting him with Zeodron Batroids, it's a tough ask, really, for me, because these Zeodrons, right, they aren't cheap. You pay a lot of points for them. We're talking, high-level heavy infantry cost. We're comparing them to guys like the Aquila Guard, Haktau, dudes like that. Anathematic, well, not quite as much as the Anathematic. They're a bit more expensive, but you get the picture. You're paying for 3 wounds, armor 6. Sorry, I've clicked on the Overdron Batroid one. We're talking about the Zeodron Batroid, which doesn't even have armor 6. It's got armor 5. BS13, no mods like Mimetism, ODD, Camo, or anything like that. And it's 4 force speed, so starting out in your deployment zone, just lumbering over towards them. With super jump, you don't quite have quite as much as, say, Tariq or the Samaritan does, because, they've got 6.2 speed or 6.4 in certain cases of certain other super jumpers. And looking at the arsenal, yep, like the guns, Red Fury, multi-rifle, K1 combi rifle, that's pretty cool. But it's just one BS13 platform with one guy who's heading out there with armor 5, and he starts to feel a bit weak. He's very vulnerable to hacking. Of course, he's a tag, making him susceptible to being possessed. And it's not really that great. I mean, you look at what Super Jump allows him to do, cool. But, I mean, we don't go over to, say, the Seraph and point at the Seraph and say, that's an absolutely broken tag, it's way too powerful. No, we say it's about right. Whereas this guy, is on the same principle, but he doesn't quite have the firepower that the Seraph does, and he doesn't have the movement speed that the Seraph has. So that's why I've never really rated these dudes. And when you put them in this big, ball together with the Samaritan, really you're just putting your eggs in one basket, and that's a very liable, very breakable basket. So they're walking through the middle of the table, trying to not get outranged by certain guns. I mean, you take on an enemy sniper, say it's a Varuna Kamal sniper in a link team, and you're going after it with these guys. I don't see it happening because you're outranged, up against mimetism. He's got, a million ballistic skill in the 2 shots, and it's just not a good idea. So you're trying to sort of work your way between buildings and get over there to a position where your big ball of 150 points can actually get a super jump shot off. Of course, just like anything infiNity, you're going to get some games where they manage to do it. But more often than not, you are just wishing that you'd spent points on other useful things. The rest of your list becomes a little bit flimsy as a result. And it's just so difficult to get anything done, you're starting to regret it. But let's build some lists. We're going to have a go at it today, and I want to try and build something around them and explain, what I might do with them. Can I also say that the models for the Zeodron Batroids just absolutely ace. I love them. Really, really cool models. So to start with, we're going to need one Umbra Samaritan, and I'm going to actually pick the Breaker Combi Rifle basic platform here, not the Lieutenant or anything, not the Assault Hacker, because he's just way too vulnerable to the killer hackers if he does that. You might be saying, well, at least he's a specialist, but wait, there was that change where the Zeodrons have these little Steldron pilots, and these guys are Whip 13. These guys make perfectly good specialists, so that may start to build the case for why this little unit might be a little bit more viable than it originally was when it first came out. Back to the Samaritan though. Breaker Combi Rifle, my feeling is that at BS12, he's not the guy we're going to be leaning on to do the shooting. He's walking through the battlefield, and although I normally prefer the Spitfire because you need to get some shooting done with that profile, since he's bringing his 2 big bouncer friends with him, they may as well do the shooting, and he'll do the close combat work up front. That's why the Breaker Combi Rifle seems to make sense to me, because it's the cheapest profile. It at least adds a tool that the Zeodrons aren't going to have. You may be up against something where a Breaker Combi Rifle ammunition actually is really, really good. Yeah, you save the SWCs, you save his points. So that's the one Samaritan that we're going to pick initially. Going to the Zeodrons, I like all 3 of them. The choices I'm going to make here are the Red Fury and the multi-rifle. I thought carefully about 2 Red Furies, just because I feel that the Red Fury is such a good gun anyway, and you really don't want to get outranged from any angle. But then the multi-rifle is nice because if you're going on that all-in bust, like that all-or-nothing, strike into their deep territory, having one multi-rifle is not bad, because you might be up against something that is just going to really need something to pierce armor. Yes, the K1 Combi Rifle is there, but I still prefer the multi-rifle, because in reactive turn as well, you're firing that double action round. There's a case for all of them. Yeah, if somebody else comes up and says, no, definitely take the K1 Combi Rifle, or definitely take this or that, I mean, there's an angle or a case for all sides, but this is my preference. So we'll spend 157 points. So these guys are going to need to do something. The really tough thing about these boys is that in the reactive turn, yeah, you may be able to sort of peek the Zeodrons out of cover and they'll be kind of resilient, but they're not going to win a lot of face-to-face rolls, let's face it. Let's face it, ha ha ha, see what I did there. And on the attack, it's going to be a little bit, you're going to be at the mercy of the table setup really as to whether super jump is going to be useful. On some tables it's just really not. And also if the table is very open, there may be some annoying snipers that are really going to ruin your day. And, Noctifer Link Team, sorry, not Noctifer Link Team, imagine that. Noctifers, Hacktow, Missile Launcher, Swiss Guard, Missile Launcher, still, again, going to be real trouble for these guys. What I thought of doing is pairing them with the Unidron team, but when I started building lists around that, I felt that I had to skimp on too much to get it up and running. And there are things you can actually afford if you just drop the Unidrons altogether. So if we do that, what we might consider doing is grabbing the single Nexus Lieutenant, like this, who conveniently costs 0 SWCs. I really want to throw on the Noctifer Missile Launcher just because if you don't include him, the ARO potential of the Zeodron link just is really kind of rubbish, whereas the Noctifer gives you some backbone. You definitely need the medtech because if something happens to your Zeodrons and they just get knocked unconscious in the reactive turn for you, you can salvage so much by having that medtech nearby. And don't forget things that get immobilized, for example. He's the engineer. After that, I feel we should be going for a mark rep tracker with HMG. I feel like this is a really important pick because, again, if you don't take something like this, just some annoying post-human sniper or whatever it might be is just going to completely shut down your list, and moving out with the Zeodrons is going to be really ugly trying to break that guy with just force of weight of dice. So the mark rep tracker to actually get some really good stats in terms of the face-to-face roll for clearing things out is just going to be really important. Once we've chosen that, we still do need to throw in some Mechadron Batroids just as cheerleaders, because that's about as cheap as it's going to get unless we take the R-Drone, which we can only have one of anyway. And that brings us already to 9 orders. So we fit in some significant things that we couldn't have otherwise if we'd taken the Unidrons. Taking that Noctifer, Medtech, Mark Rep Tracker all together is something we wouldn't have been able to afford if we'd just gone Unidrons after that. So I kind of like the utility of this. You can't just rely on your 157-point link team with Zeodrons and Samaritan. You need other tools in the list to be able to back them up and provide covering fire. Covering fire, we say, not that that's a thing. Now here's where it gets interesting. I actually quite like the new Greif operator in this context, and in general the Greif operator can be useful. I don't think he's amazing. I don't think he's the best thing in the game. I just think he's usable and he's viable in a list. The nice thing about this guy is that he sort of slots perfectly with the rest of the points we've got. It takes us up to 5 SWCs. And you can probably imagine, can't you, the situation where there's that stupid Varuna, Kamau sniper over there, and even your mark rep tracker is going to have a hard time killing him. You're talking 4 dice and 12s versus 2 dice and 16s. It's kind of ugh. The Greif operator, though, you might be able to get an impersonation angle where you can actually shoot him from, say, 10 inches away or whatever it might be, where it's +3 range for you and 0 range band for him. If you get too close, he uses the pistol. And he's going to ignore a surprise shot, but you ignore the mimetism, and maybe you've got an angle where you've got cover and he doesn't. So in that sort of setup, we're talking about 3 dice on 14s for you and 2 dice on 13s for him, which is still kind of not great. You can easily die there, but odds are in your favor, and it's fairly low risk for high reward. If you just snag that guy, then winning the game's a lot easier. So for that kind of thing, it's actually, quite palatable. Again, that post-human sniper just showing up out of nowhere to fire at your Umbra Samaritan. You move out, he shoots, you basically dodge with everybody in the link team. The Zeodrons can take it, the Umbra can potentially dodge given he's got hyperdynamics. And then after that model's been revealed, you may be able to go after it with your impersonator or your mark rep tracker. But again, the impersonator may be in a spot to reach models that the mark rep can't get to an exact turn. So I'm kind of liking that. I'm kind of liking that style. It's a shame that the Greif operator is so weak in close combat. Otherwise, that would be the way to go. But don't forget that given his deployment skill and his ability to get right next to their lines, you might be able to make some sort of move where he breaks out of Marcus State and moves close enough to them that you force them to take a zone of control change phase, and then you go into close combat with them, and then you rush over the side that side of the table with your Umbra and your Zeodrons and mash face. Imagine the Umbra making into contact with something that the Greif operator's already moved into base with. Let's say you're playing against a vanilla Pan-Oceania list and they're running a Jotun, which I don't think you'd really do these days given the amount of fatality level 2 in a link team these days. But let's say they are running a big fat tag, Maru to something, and somehow the Greif operator manages to tie it up in close combat. Then you run your Samaritan and Zeodrons directly over there, and you're attacking with the support of your Greif operator. So rolling 3 dice and 24s with Brathion, or even just 2 dice and 24s with your Vorpal close combat weapon. That could be really cool. So this list strikes me as intriguing. I don't think it's a good list just because I think the Zeodrons and Samaritan are still a bit too weak and they're a little bit too dependent on matchup, a little bit too dependent on the way the table looks. But I find it intriguing, and I think it could be quite a challenging but rewarding list to play once you start getting really good at it. I can imagine that if you're very disciplined in the way you do your strike, by picking off the easy targets and then relocating at the end of your turn, your Zeodrons might be in a position towards their side of the table where their guns are generally going to be in range and arrow, and if it costs them an entire turn to just kill one of them or reduce them to just 1 wound, you start to pull ahead there in terms of tempo. If your Umbra Samaritan's already picked up a wound or two, is nearby, it's just so much easier for him to snowball and get onto their side of the table. And remember, you don't need to have your Harry's team active for them to do damage. The tags on their own right, and the Samaritan's very powerful in his own right, and you may end up splitting them up and going after various things with them once they get to that point. You just have to sort of overcome that hurdle of your opponent possibly having a better ranged game than you do. And again, defending, it's going to be a matter of using your Noctifer and your Zeodrons in a very carefully positioned way to block things off. But yeah, hacking's a problem, jammers are a problem. It's not great, is it? Don't forget the Blitzens too. If you're being shot at and you need to ARO, definitely worth using the Blitzens if the Blitzens are at the correct range band and the Red Fury and the multi-rifle aren't. If you get a little bit lucky, that could be really, not just a saving grace, but, swinging the game around to a massive advantage for you. Imagine if he's just coming around with, a cutter or whatever it may be, and you decide to throw some lucky Blitzens at him, and you get a crit. That could just completely shut down an opponent, like just annihilating them, giving you a major win, that kind of thing. And not to mention the fact that with this list, compared to the Unidrons version of the list, you've got the Echidrons there, so you could potentially use baggage to actually reload the Zeodrons as well. So yeah, interesting list. I may end up buying some Zeodrons just because I love the model, or I might play this on Tabletop Simulator someday. But yeah, not the strongest Onyx list, but a really intriguing one. What do we take a look at next? I'm thinking Tartary Armored Core, TAC, as some people call them. Core with a K. I was looking at these guys recently and trying to sort of understand them a bit more because I never paid a lot of attention to this sectorial when it came out. I had that game of Imperial Service recently against Vanilla Ariadna, and I saw how potentially good the veteran Kazakhs can be. And that's what got me thinking about them in the context of this sectorial, because I really do feel that the linkable, wildcardable veteran Kazakhs, are possibly the strongest thing about the sectorial as far as I can see, and I haven't looked into it very hard. But let's have a look at building a list that does incorporate them. Straight away, I'm feeling that the APHMG, if it's going in a core link team, which it is really a must, because you've got a 5-man link team backing this guy up, Blistical 16 with Mimetism, APHMG. It sort of starts to rival what the Dakini HMG can do, assisted fire, mimetism, all the link team. He could be hitting on 17s with 5 dice. This guy's hitting on 16s with 5 dice, mimetism on either side. You'd have AP instead of shock, but it's still a very, very powerful gun, and that's something that can sometimes be lacking in Ariadna, is just something to really act as a wrecking ball to demolish an enemy ARO target. So I think the APHMG is really, really good choice to start us off with. This guy's cool, man. He's armor 4. He's not hackable. The 0 BTS isn't going to come up as much as you'd think. Shock immunity and veteran level 2 is really useful when you're going across the board to run through a jammer field, for example, and he doesn't really care. So very, very important. The other profile that I think is kind of cool in the context of a link team is just the straight up T2 rifle with the X-Visor. The T2 rifle is the kind of gun that's really going to put the fear of God into like tags and things like that. And it's also going to be better than the APHMG when you're up against NWI and dogged kind of stuff, because the APHMG is going to hit them for 1 wound at a time, whereas the T2 rifle only has to get one of them through and they lose both their wounds effectively, or their wound plus dogged or whatever it may be. X-Visor means that you're not going to be in a situation where you really want to use the T2 rifle, but they're just a little bit too far away, so you can't justify it. X-Visor changes that. So you come around and you're shooting, say, Gazimatiwa and guys like that, and you might be 16 inches away. Well, in this case, you've got the link team, so you're still hitting them on 16s on 4 dice, and that's a much better way of getting around the smoke dodge roll. Now we can add more veteran Kazakhs, but after we've got both these guys in there, I feel like they do the job of the shooting. And because they can join in with just basic line Kazakhs, there's no need to bloat the points of this link team any further. And I've been over the theory of that quite a number of times. So veteran Kazakh, we'll grab a lieutenant, just 9 points. Given that these guys are so cheap, and given that their availability total, you really should be using them in a attack sectorial, I reckon. Forward Observer, why not? Can you add the 112? Oh, that's if you've got Frontovix. Okay, so come back to the line Kazakhs. We may find other wildcards in this sectorial that we can add, but for now, I'm really just gonna throw in just a couple of basic line troopers, and we'll add the rest later. So in this case, we've got we've got 2 veteran Kazakhs and 3 normal line Kazakhs. So we've got the juniors and the seniors in the link team, plus the 112. Gonna go and grab the dozer and add some tractor mules as well. I want a nice robust list. It's not going to be like a limit insertion list like we did with Onyx. So that's something I'm going to be getting right off the bat. Kazakh Spetsnaz, availability forward in the sectorial, we are going to take at least 1. Although the veteran Kazakh with APHMG is going to do the heavy lifting of shooting things, the Spetsnaz allows us to deploy on a completely different side of the table, possibly even as our reserve trooper. And again, there are going to be some targets that he's just going to be better against than the veteran Kazakh is, because he's got that marksmanship level 2 and surprise attack, things like that. So it's still worth taking him. He also has the option to move out and go freely on his own in a way that is going to be superior to the veteran Kazakh with APHMG, who's going to want to stay with that defensive link team until it's time to really grind out and move out on this big turn. The Spetsnaz, even though his job overlaps with the veteran Kazakh, we're definitely going to put him in there. I think he really is worth it. What else did I want? I would really like some stuff that can go out in the midfield and press buttons, and I think for that, the new Strelok is going to be our person for that. Forward Observer, boarding shotgun, I like it. He's not going to be needing to do that much fighting, and when he does, he's going to be in the midfield anyway, usually fighting other midfielders, so the boarding shotgun's not bad. A lot of the time he's just going to be pressing buttons, so at least we've got him there. Only ambush camouflage, so not the best. I also like the look of this K9, mostly for the models, but yeah, it's not like we're playing other versions of Ariadne where there's a lot of midfield fighters out there. So I think the Strelok K9 with the K9 antibody is not a bad idea. Just setting them up in close combat with something, or yeah, sometimes moving out, getting them to force their arrow, allowing you to move further forward with your Strelok. There are a lot of little tricks you can pull with them. So we'll leave them in for the moment. I definitely like the look of a couple of Irmandinos. Maybe we'll take one out later. And the Dog Warrior as well. The real power of the Dog Warrior is he goes in the first list, and you use him as a bit of a bullet, really. A dispensable kind of guy. And he rushes over there getting work done. He can be quite good defensively as well. And he's going to be a great source of smoke, which is something that we don't have much of. Oh, well, Irmandino's coming list, we do. But Dog Warrior, I'm really big fan of the Dog Warrior. I find him so resilient. Total Immunity's had a buff recently. He's something that you can have in your list which runs over there irrespective of how many flash pulse arrows they've got, and he still gets to their line ready to hit them with chain rifles or close combat attacks. So you'd really be wanting to take the Dog Warrior in the sectorial, in my opinion. We've got a ton of SWCs that we haven't spent, and I was going to grab a Tank Hunter actually, just because it beefs up our ARO game a whole lot. Oh, and that puts us over points. We'll take out one Irmandino, and then we'll throw on a Warcore, and that is starting to look like a more of a robust list, right? There we go. Yeah. Then we'll bring the Strelok with K9 into this side. And we're starting to look really good here. I just want to make sure that the Group 2 is getting a lot done. So those orders in Group 2 are mostly going to be spent on the Irmandino, who is a specialist, but not much else. I guess the Strelok as well going to be doing work. It might be better to replace somebody here. Maybe you could put the Spetsnaz in and use the Spetsnaz's order for shooting, but he wouldn't get that many of them. The maybe we'll place the... If I bring the dozer back into Group 1 and move the tractor mules there, that will allow me to bring the 112 over, and the Strelok and the Tank Hunter. So now Group 1 is mostly focused on either the Dog Warrior or the Spetsnaz or the Link Team, so you'll always have stuff to do with your Group 1 orders, and that's really important. With Group 2, though, you can choose between funneling those orders into the Strelok, or the well, either of the Streloks, or the Umandino, or the Tank Hunter to reposition, for example, or the Doctor to revive somebody, depending what your needs are. So that's actually starting to look really effective. Yeah, really liking this. Damn. So ARO game, obviously the Tank Hunter stays in marker state for as long as he can until he gets that really good shot opportunity. You've got the veteran Kazakh, you know, shooting back if you really want to, or the Spetsnaz coming out of marker state to respond. But it's not the hugest ARO sort of list, but generally you're trying to sit back, keep your head down, rely on the Dog Warrior, perhaps, and the Streloks deployed a little bit further forward, and the Umandino to use their chain rifles and smoke and so forth to defend, and the other guys a bit further back, I suppose. But in the active turn, there are a few things that are going to be able to stand up to the might of the veteran Kazakh APHMG in the Link Team, or the Spetsnaz, for example. And if they are keeping their heads down and not providing any arrows to you, you run over there with the Dog Warrior, who, by the way, is very, very good at surviving something like a Noctifer missile launcher showing up, because he's got total immunity. He defends with the dodge, the smoke dodge, and if he does get hit, he's got total immunity there, so very, very useful attack piece on those kind of fronts. Plenty of specialization for button pressing. I don't know how well this Canine Antipode would do in the long run. Feel free to comment if you've had a lot of success with them and you have some tips. We don't really want to hear sort of, you know, how we went on individual games, but just the trend of, you know, what's useful about them in the long run. I do like that midfield submachine gun, and I do like the idea of ganging up on people with moving the Antipode into close combat and the Strelok round to shoot you. So I think there are some very big targets that could be laid low by, you know, a fairly humble unit in terms of points. Looking good. I really like this. I might play this on Tabletop Simulator. Okay. The last list we're going to look at is going to be based around one profile in NCA, which came out to be added to NCA. And that is the Aquila Guard Specialist Operative FTO with multi-rifle. So, what do we think of this guy? I'm just going to minimize my face a little bit here. I find this a really fascinating profile. So, he becomes the Specialist, which is really handy, and he's a wild card, allowing him to join any fire team, including a core fire team. So would have a ballistic skill 18 Aquila Guard moving around with, you know, MSV3 and firing 4 dice with his multi-rifle, which can be quite strong. I worry that this kind of profile would struggle for some of the same reasons that the Asura kind of struggles, even though she's linkable. And that is that you start in your deployment zone, you have to sort of move out and find those angles and get around there, and it can be quite slow and cumbersome. And if you end your turn too far out into the battlefield, there are ways that he can be laid low and taken down by, you know, very powerful enemy troops. And as we've seen from the last couple of lists we've just built, every faction's got something, don't they? Every faction's got some tools. But wildcard, there are lots of different things that he can get in on. So what we might experiment with now are some of the possibilities. I was looking at this the other day, and I tried joining him in with Orc Troopers, and I think it always ends up becoming so expensive. Whereas elsewhere in the sectorial, you've got a lot of cheaper but very efficient and effective troopers. And if you can't get them up to that 5-man link team status, that's ideal. Doing it with orcs, though, is just a bit hard. I mean, 1 Aquila Guard and 4 orc troopers, the quality of the rest of your list is not great. And they suffer the same problem that all of the, you know, pain train heavy infantry link teams do, which is, you know, hidden deployment missile launchers, hacking, blah, 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 blah. And in this case, you wouldn't even have the tactical awareness gimmick that, not even a gimmick, the tactical awareness superpower that Invincible Army and the Suryats have. So it'll just be a kind of a lame version of that, so to speak. So I don't really want to go down that path. I don't even want to go down the Haris path where you can add like a Orc Trooper and maybe a CSU or whatever it may be. Wild cutting, and sorry, not CSU, somebody else who can wild cut, like by Pandra or something, I don't know. What I am going to do though is I'm going to add him to a link team of Fusiliers, and my thinking here is that if we take a bunch of Fusiliers and CSUs, the theory is that depending on what the CSUs roll up, they can become part of the link team or stay out of it. You know, sometimes the Fusiliers are going to be better, sometimes they are. Also, if you lose members, the CSUs can then sub in because they count as Fusiliers for the building of the link team. So in that kind of case, you can take a missile launcher Fusilier to ARO with, and if they do kill him, you just plug in a CSU and go out and start fighting again. Or if they lose the face-to-face roll, well, they just got hit by missile launcher, so it's not great. Hacking device, lieutenant, paramedic, just when you're out in the field, that kind of thing, or even just a pleb, doesn't really matter. So that's your 4 Fusiliers plus Aquila, and then you add 2 of these specialist operative CSUs, which is a great profile and very, very cheap. And once you've got this set up, the Aquila Guard doesn't really have to do very much at the start of the game if he doesn't want to. The Fusiliers are really able to just pumping up the arrows. They can take a hit if they need to, and they can be resupplied in terms of numbers with the CSUs, and then we go on and build the rest of the list. So we have to take a trauma dock in this case because we want to be able to revive an unconscious Fusilier if he was holding a missile launcher. We want to go and grab the Fugazis because, again, we intend on building a nice big robust list. The Pathfinder is a particularly good model to take in Pan-Oceania in general, so I'll grab him. I was thinking of buffing this list up with something really big and juicy like a Swiss Guard, but you know, can we afford that? I'm not sure. I do really like Ada Swanson in the sectorial. I think that she's a bad choice within the context of Shazvasti, which is disappointing because that's what she is. But NCA is a sectorial which often lacks these, you know, tricky things and finesse and, you know, these kinds of profiles that have like good close combat, blah 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 blah. And Ada Swanson just has so many little tools that you don't have with your other troopers. You compare her to the Locust, and the Locust doesn't have the same kind of tricks that she does with the viral mines and submachine guns, mimetism, that kind of thing. Well, obviously they have ODD, but Scavenger maybe. I just think that she's a really useful toolbox to go out in the midfield, and you can use a lot of other things for your button pressing and your specialization, so you don't really need her so much for that. So I think that she can stay. But yeah, we've got a lot of points. We've already made it to 13 orders. I really do feel like this is the kind of list that could make use of a Swiss Guard missile launcher or HMG, and missile launcher's always been my favorite profile. What else can we afford if we put them in there? A little bit. A little bit. Is that the best way? Maybe not. No, we'll drop them back out. So we'll take the Bulletier, because we definitely need things that can move over and actually attack when it's our turn, so we'll take the Bulletier. If we're going down that path, we should probably have a Machinist in there. I love the NCA Bioimmunity guy. He can only be part of a fire team of bolts, but paying 1 additional point for that veteran level 1 means that, you know, you can use him in scenarios where you have to get over their side and have to avoid jammers, and he can do that. And even in looting and sabotaging, he's going over there and hitting the objective on a 10 or less, so a 50-50 chance with his D-charges. So I think that might not be a bad idea. Then we can continue to use our SWCs by throwing in like an HMG, Sierra Drone Bot. We could even upgrade one of our Fusiliers to a Fusilier with HMG. I think that's a pretty decent idea. Shooting with a Fusilier HMG in the link team at that good range is probably better than the Aquila Guard doing it, because the Aquila Guard's going to be hitting on, I guess, long range in the link team. It's got 18s down to 12s, I think it is, long range against cover. Yeah, whereas the Fusilier is going to be a 15s on 5 dice, so that's definitely a good pick. Still got another 14 points. In another version of this list, I also used the Garuda. That's another way you can go, is drop out the Sierra John bot and put the Garuda in there, just for that fast attack perspective. But if you're looking for something lethal to spend orders on, I do feel like it's still going to be Ada Swanson or the Bulleteer most of the time for move outs. So yeah, maybe the John bot's okay actually. I've still always liked the combination of the Machinist John bot and assisted fire from the Hacker. I think that's always going to be a solid option. So just with 14 more points, we may just grab an Auxilia. Find that Flamethrower can be really useful for defending your deployment zone. That's one thing that Pano doesn't do that well with, but with CSUs though, with the 2 nanopulses, that's still pretty good. Let's just quickly look at what we've got, because we've got a whopping 17 orders here, which is something which I always really like. Bulleteer needs to go into Group 1. Ada Swanson needs to go into Group 1. That will allow us to pull a couple of John bots into Group 2. And yeah, if we're spending orders on Group 1, it can be the Bulleteer or the Ada Swanson in turns 1 or 2 moving out there. Group 2's orders can be spent on basically just moving out with the John bot and shooting things long range, or pressing buttons with the Pathfinder, or even moving out with the Auxilia to attack. I think it's fine. So the idea here is that over the course of the battle, you're playing a bit of attrition. You know, you're waiting for them to run out of time or run out of good attacking pieces, for example. They are going to be trying to clear out your Fusilier missile launcher on Overwatch there. They may be attacking your Sierra John bot depending on where it's positioned, that kind of thing. They may be sending guys over to your side of the table to get kills. Once you've weathered a little bit of that, you should really technically be in a position where you still have your Aquila Guard hanging out somewhere safe, and you should still have enough Fusiliers or CSUs left over to be able to form a link team with them. So you drop your link team, spend a command token, he goes in there, and when your opponent has perhaps run out of arrow pieces, him or herself, because your Bulleteer's ripped into it, or Ada's shot it down, or you've got the Sierra John bot to kill it, or something like that, you have this one big turn where you charge across the board with 10 orders, turn 2 or 3, and it's going to be led by that Aquila Guard. And he's just going to go into range of whatever he can, and he's going to be Ballistic Skill 18 with 4 dice on a multi-rifle, and that should be enough to shoot up some things and really end a lot of games if he can get over there quick enough. He can also be the kind of model where if you're going first and you have the last... if you're going first and you're waiting for the last turn and you're trying to move him over to a position where, say, it's safe area and your opponent's trying to move into zones, or it's acquisition and he's the data tracker standing in the middle. Aquila Guard FTO, great data tracker, by the way. You can be in a position where they need to crack him in their last turn, and he's covering the entire middle of the board because you've moved him right out there. They start moving Ariadne models out in camo state. You just discover, if they declare a shot at him, he's probably going to tank that and weather that. And in that reactive turn, you don't need to go into suppression fire. Having all of those linked bonuses and that extra dice, Ballistic Skill 18 multi-rifle, it's just going to be so difficult for them to unlodge him if you've waited and you've been disciplined enough throughout the game to get to that point where he's just hanging there. So such a useful model in the right context. So this is a nifty little list. I feel like we need to rejig a few things to spend that last SWC point. I really wouldn't mind getting a Hexa in there somewhere. I feel like maybe we don't need to have 7 orders in this list. It could be dropped down to 15 orders. So we're talking about Group 2 here. So from 17 orders to 15 orders, allowing us to plug in maybe a Hexa Sniper or Hexa Spitfire or something like that, or that Garuda, and just get a little bit more quality in terms of the guns over the course of the game, rather than putting up too much into just the bulk orders. But yeah, NCA is one of those factions which, surprisingly, despite the reputation of its faction being about quality troopers and expensive stuff, has the opportunity to field such a large amount of cheap stuff that it can really well support the the few high-tech, high ability, high caliber models like the Aquila Guard, that it can be worth playing it this way. So again, another list that I might throw out there on Tabletop Simulator. They look really cool. I don't have my Pano anymore. I've given them away in real life, so I won't be playing them on the tabletop. But yeah, try out the Aquila Guard. I definitely think there are other lists you can build with him. I tried building a limited insertion list which had 2 Swiss Guards and him in a Haris team. But that's a whole different kettle of fish. You're sort of relying on the right table for that to work out well. Hope you guys enjoyed this episode of Let's Build Some Lists. We took a look at Onyx, TAC, and NCA. Had a good time. And hopefully see you guys back soon for some more videos.